The clock may be ticking on TikTok. The Supreme Court will hear arguments next month over the constitutionality of the law that could ban the social media app in the United States. The law, passed by Congress over national security concerns, requires the app's Chinese parent company ByteDance to sell by January 19th or be banned. Lawyers for ByteDance had urged the Supreme Court to take on the case, arguing the law violates the First Amendment. Justices agreed to take on the case January 10th. Joining me now is attorney Danny Karon. Danny, great to see you as always. Let's start with, why do you think the Supreme Court decided to take on this case?
The Supreme Court accepts very few cases on review. On certiorari, it's called, less than 2% in fact. So it's got to be really, really important. Now, whether they take a case or not channels through Supreme Court Rule 10, which says a couple of things. One, it's got to involve a question of federal law, which this does. It involves the First Amendment. And two, basically, it's got to be really important. And this really is. Consider the stakeholders involved. You've got not just TikTok, but DOJ, Justice Department, the national security apparatus, and 170 million users, a lot of whom derive their revenue and livelihood from the platform. So a lot of stakeholders are involved here, and you put all this together, and that's why the Supreme Court decided to take the case.
Right. This really impacts all Americans, even if you're not on, with the 170 million who are on the app. Whose case is stronger here, the federal government's or TikTok's?
They have different cases. In law, the right answer comes from putting the right question, it's said. Now, TikTok's going to argue it's all about the First Amendment. It's an unconstitutional restriction on our free speech. The DOJ, on the other hand, is going to argue, hey, listen, it's a function or matter of national security, and the First Amendment is not unlimited. There are restrictions and limitations to it, such as obscenity, fighting words, incitement, and they're going to want to create a new exception, national security. That's how these arguments are going to shape up on both sides of the V.
Right, and the national security concern is what got bipartisan support for this law. Let's look at the potential outcomes, Danny. What happens next if justices side with the federal government or if they side with TikTok?
If they side with the government, it seems that TikTok would be shut down, unless that is they divested themselves and sold to somebody who's non-Chinese, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen by January 19th. If TikTok wins, it could be business as usual, or with some nuances. We don't know what the court's going to say. It might not be as cut and dried as you win, you lose. It might be a nuanced, blended decision. The court does that all the time.
President-elect Donald Trump has been very outspoken about this TikTok issue. He once opposed TikTok, but is now pledging to save the social media app. How does Trump play into all this, Danny, and what kind of power would he have here?
During his first term, he was no fan of TikTok, no fan of the social media platforms. But then when TikTok helped develop and encourage the youth vote to vote for him and he won, he's now said, yeah, let's take a look. But if TikTok loses, there's not much he can do. The Supreme Court's the highest court in the land. He does not have the power to step over them. Maybe he would encourage Congress to pass a constitutional amendment, which is how you get around a Supreme Court ruling, but that'll never happen. Why? Because there was bipartisan support for the act that banned TikTok. So if TikTok loses, President-elect Trump is kind of stuck with their decision.
Lastly, how could this case impact future First Amendment cases involving social media? Because some say that this ban could be a slippery slope.
I'm concerned about the slippery slope too, and not just with respect to social media. If you have a foreign-owned entity, whether it's a chip manufacturer, a computer manufacturer, a car company, and somebody on Capitol Hill gets worked up about maybe something unsavory, unkosher, and improper that's happening over there.
Right.
If we have other bills making their way through what TikTok calls an unlawful bill of attainder, which is an act specifically directed toward a company or person, this could be the beginning of something kind of dangerous.
All right. All eyes will be on the Supreme Court. Attorney Danny Karon. Danny, thank you so much and happy holidays.
Always a pleasure. You too, Rob.